The Janapadas were the realms, republics and kingdoms of the Indian Vedic period, Late Bronze Age into from about 1200 BCE to the 6th century BCE, concluding with the rise of 16 Mahajanapadas. Most of the states were later annexed by more powerful neighbours, whilst others remained independent. Etymology. The Sanskrit term Janapada is a tapa-usha compound term, composed of two words, janas and pada. Jana means people or subject. The word pada means foot. From its earliest attestation, the word has had a double meaning of realm, territory, and subject population. Linguist George Dunkel compares the Greek andropadon, slave, to pi*padam, fetters. Sanskrit padam, usually taken to mean footprint, trail, diverges in accent from the pi reconstruction. For the sense of population of the land, padasujanas, the inverted padajana would be expected. A primary meaning of place of the people, janasupadam, would not explain why the compound is of masculine gender. An original Vandava, land and people, is conceivable, but a dual inflection would be expected. Evolution. Literary evidence suggests that the Janapadas flourished between 1500 BCE and 500 BCE. The earliest mention of the term Janapada occurs in the Aitareya and Shatapada Brahmana texts. In the Vedic Samhitas, the term Jana denotes a tribe whose members believed in a shared ancestry. The Janas were headed by a king. The Samiti was a common assembly of the Jana members, and had the power to elect or dethrone the king. The Sabha was a smaller assembly of wise elders, who advised the king. The Janas were originally semi-nomadic pastoral communities, but gradually came to be associated with specific territories as they became less mobile. Various kulas developed within the Jana, each with its own chief. Gradually, the necessities of defense and warfare prompted the Janas to form military groupings headed by Janapadans. This model ultimately evolved into the establishment of political units known as the Janapadas. While some of the Janas evolved into their own Janapadas, others appear to have mixed together to form a common Janapada. According to the political scientist Sudama Misra, the name of the Panchala Janapada suggests that it was a fusion of 5 Janas. Some Janas mentioned in the earliest texts do not find a mention in the later texts. Misra theorizes that these smaller Janas were conquered by and assimilated into the larger Janas. Janapadas were gradually dissolved around 500 BCE. The disestablishment can be attributed to the rise of imperial powers within India, as well as foreign invaders. Nature. The Janapada were highest political unit in ancient India during this period. These polities were usually monarchical and succession was hereditary. The head of a kingdom was called heir king. A chief or priest and a commander of administrating the army who would assist the king. There were also 2 other political bodies, the thought to be a council of elders and the general assembly of the entire people. The boundaries of the kingdoms. Often rivers formed the boundaries of 2 neighbouring kingdoms, as was the case between the northern and southern Panchala and between the western and eastern Kuru. Sometimes, large forests which were larger than the kingdoms themselves formed the boundaries, as was the case of the Naimisha forest between Panchala and Kosala kingdoms. Mountain ranges like Himalaya, Vindhya and Safya also formed the boundaries. The cities and villages. Some kingdoms possessed a main city that served as its capital. For example, the capital of Pandava's kingdom was Indraprastha and the Kauravas' kingdom was Hastinapura. Ahichatra was the capital of northern Panchala, whereas Kampalya was the capital of southern Panchala. Kosala kingdom had its capital as Ayodhya. Apart from the main city or capital, where the palace of the ruling king was situated, there were small towns and villages spread in a kingdom. Tax was collected by the officers appointed by the king from these villages and towns. What the king offered in return to these villages and towns was protection from the attack of other kings and robber tribes, as well as from invading foreign nomadic tribes. The king also enforced code and order in his kingdom by punishing the guilty. Administration. The Janapadas had Kshatriya rulers. Based on literary references, historians have theorized that the Janapadas were administered by the following assemblies in addition to the king. Sabha, an assembly of qualified members who advised the king and performed judicial functions. In the Ganas, a republican Janapadas, they also handled administration. Paura was the assembly of the capital city, and handled municipal administration. Janapada, the Janapada assembly represented the rest of the Janapada, possibly the villages, which were administered by Gramini. Some historians have also theorized that there was a common assembly called the Paura Janapada, but others such as Ramcharan Sharma disagree with this theory. The existence of Paura and Janapada itself is a controversial matter. Indian nationalist historians such as K.P. Jayus will have argued that the existence of such assemblies is evidence of prevalence of democracy in ancient India. V.B. Misra notes that the contemporary society was divided into the four Varnas, and the Kshatriya ruling class had all the political rights. Not all the citizens in a Janapada had political rights. Based on Gautama's Dharma Sutra, Jayus well theorized that the low-caste Shudras could be members of the Paura assembly. According to A.S. Altekar, this theory is based on a misunderstanding of the text. The term Paura in the relevant portion of the Dharma Sutra refers to a resident of the city, not the member of the city assembly. Jayus will also argue that the members of the supposed Paura Janapada assembly acted as counselors to the king, and made other important decisions such as imposing taxes in times of emergency. Once again, Altekar argued that these conclusions are based on misinterpretations of the literary advance. For example, Jayus has wrongly translated the word a mantra in a Ramayana verse as to offer advice. It actually means to bid farewell in proper context. Interactions between kingdoms. There was no border security for a kingdom, and border disputes were very rare. One king might conduct a military campaign and defeat another king in a battle lasting for a day. The defeated king would acknowledge the supremacy of the victorious king. The defeated king might sometimes be asked to give a tribute to the victorious king. Such tribute would be collected only once, not on a periodic basis. The defeated king, in most cases, would be free to rule his own kingdom, without maintaining any contact with the victorious king. There was no annexation of one kingdom by another. Often a military general conducted these campaigns on behalf of his king. A military campaign and tribute collection was often associated with a great sacrifice conducted in the kingdom of the campaigning king. The defeated king also was invited to attend these sacrifice ceremonies as a friend and ally. New kingdoms. New kingdoms were formed when a major clan produced more than one king in a generation. The Kuru clan of kings was very successful in governing throughout North India with their numerous kingdoms, which were formed after each successive generation. Similarly, the Yadava clan of kings formed numerous kingdoms in central India. Cultural differences. Western parts of India were dominated by tribes who had a slightly different culture that was considered as non-Vedic by the mainstream Vedic culture prevailed in the Kuru and Panchala kingdoms. Similarly, there were some tribes in the eastern regions of India considered to be in this category. Tribes with non-Vedic Vedic culture, especially those of barbaric nature, were collectively termed as milcha. Very little was mentioned in the ancient Indian literature about the kingdoms to the north, beyond the Himalayas. China was mentioned as a kingdom known as China, often grouped with Milcha kingdoms. List of Janapadas. Vedic literature. The Vedas mention 5 subdivisions of ancient India: Udachya, Prachya, Dakshina, Pratachya, Madhya Desha. The Vedic literature mentions the following janas: Janapadas. Puranic literature. The Puranas mention 7 subdivisions of ancient India: Udachya, Prachya, Dakshinapada, Aparanta, Madhya Desha, Parvadashran, Vindhyaprashta. The Puranic texts mention the following Janapadas. Sanskrit epics. The Bhishma Parva of the Mahabharata mentions around 230 Janapadas, while the Ramayana mentions only a few of these. Unlike the Puranas, the Mahabharata does not specify any geographical divisions of ancient India, but does support the classification of certain Janapadas as southern and northern. Buddhist canon. The Buddhist canonical texts primarily refer to the following 16 Mahajanapadas. The Jain text Bhagavati Sutra also mentions 16 important Janapadas, but the names differ from the ones mentioned in the Buddhist texts.